the trigger points you got back here. I would actually love to hear about trigger points sometime.
Just chemical buildup.
So it is a thing. Okay. Because I feel like I've heard it's fake. Like trigger points aren't real. I've heard some people say trigger points are like the most important thing. So
you can tell a lot from a trigger point, but we'll learn more, I'm sure, as we get into needling.
And I sadly did not bring the right extension for the microphone, but I tested out so I can go where I'm talking.
Okay.
It's still pretty good, but I would say talk.
Okay.
You know, a little more loudly. But
Yell.
anyways, we're screaming at each other. All right, so welcome back to the Unhurried and Honest podcast. My name is Ben Ritchie. These are my friends, Hunter Hardman and Lance Moore. You will recognize them from the lower back chiropractor episode we had. And would totally recommend to go back to that because we'll probably touch on some similar subjects. If you have lower back pain, or if you know someone lower back pain who maybe they've been told they have a herniated disc and need surgery, we really went in depth on that about why that really may not be the case, possibly, but really maybe not. So I would recommend going back to listen to that. Those guys did their whole intro, so I'm not going to make them do that again. But they are both physical therapists here in the Madison area. So I just want to dive right in. The episode today is mainly about running, but I wanted to touch on one thing related to the shoulder that I thought of later. So I'm going to hit y'all with a true or false question to get started. So I hope you've been studying. My shoulder starts to hurt when I raise it up or whatever with certain movements, you know, vacuuming or putting stuff up on the shelf. Regardless, my shoulder starts to hurt. I go to the doctor. Of course, we get some imaging done and they say, you have a partially torn rotator cuff or a partially torn supraspinatus, which obviously is part of the rotator cuff. So the doctor says, you have to have surgery. It's torn. True or false? And explain why.
As anything in our field, it depends, but
But
yeah,
the statement is the only way.
Yeah, the only way
surgical
is,
intervention.
yeah, I would say that's false, right? Yeah, there's plenty of research out there that shows you can load a torn tendon, musculotendinous junction, and it can respond. Again, I think we talked about this the first time, but our bodies are designed to heal, right? They can heal themselves. So the question is, what's causing it to be torn? Do you have a certain restriction in your neck or thoracic spine? Do you have full scapular mobility? Do you have good lower trap function? How's your actual rotator cuff strength? Is your pain even coming from your rotator cuff? Is it biceps tendonitis? Is it supraspinatus tendonitis? Like there's so many different questions you can ask and examine with that, like there's some more questions to be had before you jump to the conclusion of you need surgery. Yeah, just unfortunately people don't realize those questions and so they agree. And then, you know, I worked at a place where they were pretty happy with a knife and there were countless people who had a rotator cuff surgery and their pain didn't change. So then you have to ask the question, like, why did that? And it's just, why did that process fail? And it goes back to, I think it was just unnecessary surgery. They weren't looking at the right things. Even the image in time shown as a torn rotator cuff, was that even what was causing their pain?
Yeah, just a few things to add on to that. With what Lance said about, is the tear in the rotator cuff, is that because of something that happened in the shoulder, or is it because of biomechanics changing due to what's happening in the neck? And if it's due to what's happening in the neck, well, if you go in and you do surgery, it's only a matter of time before that wears down again. Similarly, we see plenty of people with torn labrums, but the reason the labrum tears is because of friction rubbing over and over and over again because of biomechanics being messed up due to what's happening in the neck. Another thing with the imaging, it's a still shot. So just because you have what looks like a partial tear in the shoulder, First of all, it doesn't mean that it was recently torn. Second of all, it doesn't mean that, like Lance said, that's what's driving or causing your pain. We care much more about, all right, does it move, does it function the correct way? And like Lance said, sometimes, yes, there is surgery required, but I think we would both argue most of the times, especially in a partial tear, that is not the case.
Okay. So just to make it really clear, you're saying, hypothetically, if we do some imaging and I have a partially torn rotator cuff, I could have torn it 4 years ago and not had pain for the past 4 years. But then there could be something else going on in a multitude of places that could be causing that.
And I think I would even say if it's something like that and there wasn't this traumatic injury that happened, and they went and it's like, yeah, my shoulder just kind of bothered me for years, don't really know what happened. I would go back to what me and Lance were describing with there's something biomechanically wrong on the neck, so it is causing the tendons to be used or overused or stressed, which is causing this partial tearing that they're seeing in the image. If that answers
Absolutely.
the question.
Yeah. So we talked a lot in the last episode about the victim and the culprit. Similar issue here, maybe. The shoulder can a lot of times be the victim, but maybe the culprit is cervical spine or thoracic spine or something else. And would y'all say, also similarly to last episode, if people are asking, okay, well, what are some good exercises for my shoulder pain? I think y'all can jump in if you want to, but I think the answer is it totally depends, because you need someone to put their hands on you, to ask you tons of questions. And I mean, Lance routed off like 6 or 7 different things that could be causing your pain. So once again, sometimes it's hard to figure out who's going to be a good therapist in your area or not, but probably the best advice would be try to find a good therapist and implement what they give you, because y'all can't make up 3 good shoulder exercises to help people, because there's 30 different problems you could have.
Yeah, and what I will say, this is without giving it a whole ton of thought, for my average shoulder patient that is having shoulder pain, if I had to give a rough estimate, I would say I'm probably giving 75% exercises that are neck and upper back and 25% that are shoulder. Now that varies depending on the patient, but generally speaking, most of my shoulder pain patients spend more time on the neck and the back than I do actually the shoulder. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Each person is unique and can't have a cookie cutter systematic. What should be systematic is the evaluation process, because that gives you the best details. So if you struggle, if they're not getting their hands on you, if they're not testing your neck or your back, not taking really a look of that, then just from what we've highlighted, the victim and culprit mentality, you gotta find, like Hunter said, the biomechanical issues first to understand why things are breaking down. If you can't find that, nothing's really going to change. Yeah, and then that would lead to a surgery, but like Hunter said, that sometimes doesn't work out 100% either. So it's just, you need to have like a good manual therapist check you out, I would say. If you can find somebody that has a manual background, they would be able to kind of assess you, or assume they would assess you in a detailed way. But
Cool. Well, glad we covered that.
Yeah.
We'll jump into running. Y'all run every now and then. Here and there. I'll just ask an offhand question. Do you have a favorite run of the past year? Just one day you went out there and it was just awesome.
I think the first thing that comes to mind, I went on a cruise with my family earlier this year. We did like New England, Northeast, and one of the stops we were at was, we were in Nova Scotia. And weather was perfect. It was beautiful. Ran along the water through some cool parks, and it was good. There was no wasn't like a super hard workout. There wasn't something we were hurrying to get back to. It was just out enjoying the scenery in a place we hadn't seen with beautiful weather. So I think that's what I think of for me in the last year.
Yeah, I've been to DC a few times over the past year, and there's been a few morning runs, like with the sun rising over Mount Washington and kind of the moon setting behind Old Abe.
Pretty awesome.
And it's just kind of it just feels, yeah, it just gives you chills down your spine. It's just American. It's awesome. Yeah. That's been fun. Olivia and I were in California too, so we were on this like ridge line of Highway 1, hiking / running and videoing, and it was only like a quarter mile, but that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Favorite long run, post long run meal
Pizza
that
beer.
you're just throwing
Pizza
down.
beer.
Give me some za. Yeah. I'll
Hold
have
the beer.
za. Yeah, hold the beer. Give me double the za.
All right, so this is a loaded question. It's gonna open up a lot of avenues that I'm sure we'll go down. But I feel like it's what a lot of people wonder when they're getting into running, or even if they've been running for a while, what's the best kind of running shoe? Take it as far as you want to take it.
Yeah, shoe technology has changed a lot over the last 10 years, I would say, where you used to have those super thin Nike, I can't remember what they were. You could like fold them in half, essentially. To now you have these super carbon plated shoes that are super rigid, anything in between. And really, it depends on what feels good, right? If they don't hurt your feet, you don't have any knee pain or back pain, hip pain with it, wear them till the rubber comes off. Like it really just depends on what's most comfortable. I don't know if there's a certain, style of shoe. I feel like if I was to generalize it, it would need to be a neutral shoe that was made for stability, so it's a little firm, but nothing that is neutral is just like there's no pronation control or support. There's no added like arch lift in the shoe. It's neutral. It's kind of just normal. And then stable is there's different kind of lasts in the shoe. So some shoes are pretty straight, some are kind of curved. If you just get a flat shoe that's just straight, I feel like most people can tolerate that and they'll benefit from that. So that just kind of depends on the brand. Hoka Clifton is one that's that way. Each one is each brand has their own style, but I've used the Hoka Clifton and have used similar models. And it's pretty much just a straight shoe, good stability. I've ran thousands of miles in 2 pairs, and literally ran like 1,200 miles in a pair. It's
wow.
fun. Yeah, and yeah. So, but it depends on the person, but it kind of depends. I know, like for Hunter's wife Emma, I don't know if she would do well in a shoe like that because she has super high arches and she doesn't need support. Her foot's just made to be super fast, so she would need to find something that's comfortable for her. Whereas for me, I have super flat, wide feet, so that kind of stable base helps me out a little bit more. So just, again, it goes back to it depends on the person.
Yeah, a few things just to kind of add on to what Lance said. It's always funny to me that people will say, well, yeah, I'm 300 to 400 miles into this pair of running shoes, like I've got to find a new pair now. And you always ask them, well, who's telling you that? It's like, well, the shoe stores. I'm like, well, of course the shoe stores are telling you need to update your shoes 300 miles in because they're trying to sell you more shoes. And so I'm similar to Lance. Like I wear my shoes so much longer than that. Now if they start to break down, it's like you getting holes on the side, and it's time to get new shoes. But I would say I'm probably doing, way over 300 to 400 before I'm looking at getting a new pair of shoes. I actually encourage most of my runners to not use the same type of shoe over and over and over again. I like for them to even change brands if possible. The foot is very moldable, and I think it's good if you place the foot in different environments so that it can adapt to those situations. So I like for my runners to do that instead of just getting kind of stuck in the same shoe. I have a stronger feeling on orthotics, which a lot of shoe stores push for orthotics. And again, it's all about, how much can you sell at the store. I try and
back to money.
I try and get all my runners out of their orthotics. most of just general population, I try and get out of orthotics as well. But I feel like vast majority of the runners and patients that I see have been sold on this orthotic and make it seem like it's gonna fix all of their issues. But most of my runners, I try and get rid of the orthotic, and then it's like Lance said, it's more about, hey, we each have different feet, right? When you look at high arch, when you look at foot that collapses more, when you look at more narrow, more wide, none of that matters too much, right? It's how do you do when you move. And so find the shoe that fits your foot good and that is comfortable, and I will go with that, as opposed to thinking, man, there's only one good shoe out there I can get. But I would recommend, for the vast majority, against orthotics for most people. So,
what's an example of someone who was told they needed orthotics? What is the reasoning? Like, is that overpronation? Is it?
Yeah, it's funny. So our boss loves to tell the story that he went into Fleet Feet, and there was the guy working was like, well, let me look at your feet, and he was like, oh, it looks like you're overpronating, so your foot's falling this direction too much. He's like, did you know that 95% of the population overpronates? And he said his response was, well, do you think if 95% of the population does that it's an abnormality, or that it's abnormal? And he said the guy was like, never actually thought about that before. So all that being said, a lot of these people selling these shoes, they're kind of taught some buzzwords, yeah, but they don't necessarily, some of them really do know their stuff, but a lot of them it's more, they're just kind of taught of what to say. Sorry, what was the question? I'm trying to think where I was going with
Like
that.
an example of...
Oh, yes, orthotics. Yeah. Okay. So what is ironic about it is we have had people that with two very different, so like one person who has too high of an arch, and then one person who has no arch at all. Vast majority of the time, the orthotics they will try and sell this person will be the exact same. In one argument, they will say, well, let's give you arch support if you have too high of an arch so that it can come up to your arch and meet it. On the flip side, for the other person, they say, well, you have no arch, let's build that arch up with this arch support. And our argument is, well, you can't say that we should give the same orthotic for two people who have vastly different issues. Now, there are definitely some instances based on like deformities, or if there's something really going on with the foot that, okay, yeah, it might benefit to have an orthotic. But I would say most of the patients I get, I don't know about you, but it's people will come in and it's like, well, they gave me this orthotic because they told me I need more arch support. So I don't know if you get a lot of those or not.
Most people runners will have some sort of orthotic, and I'm not as quick. If they've been running in it for a while, I might once we fix some of the biomechanical things in the ankle or hip or back or wherever it's going on, maybe encourage them to kind of start taking out of them, because it's like you move better now. But I'm against it. I think if you can't treat have the same treatment for two different issues. Your foot's designed to pronate and supinate. If you have a stable ankle and you have a good solid base there, then your foot's going to do what it needs to do. It needs to absorb and push off. An orthotic just limits that, and then it weakens the foot, which can cause further issues later on the road. So, I've had super people, but I've had some patients who have just, I don't know if it's just genetics, but they have like the flattest feet, and the solution was, hey, you need orthotics. I'm not totally against them. We just don't think everybody needs them. There should be like a last resort, if you will, as you try to. I wouldn't start off with them, because I've had several patients myself who, I went and got these orthotics, and then I didn't like them, so I went and bought these off the shelf, and those fit better. They didn't hurt my feet, and you look at it, one of them's super flimsy. It's just like a gel pad, and the other one's like a super arch support. And it's just like you just wasted $80 on two things you didn't really need. So there's no real definite answer to, I guess, that question. It's more so of like, do what's comfortable. Start with a shoe. Find a shoe that you like, that's comfortable, gives you plenty of room. feels comfortable on your feet, and then if you have problems with that, then you gotta start looking at, are you moving the right way? I feel like we have a trend of over support, and that just doesn't really help you much at all. It really causes more breakdown in the wrong areas.
Because
It just furthers your compensations. Like if the foot's not designed to have arch support, right? People walk with sandals for thousands of years, and your foot flattens and then comes out of it, twists, right? And so it's just a kind of energy transfer, right? So why would we decrease that if that's how we're designed to move? Again, that will eventually lead to breakdown in other areas that might not be repairable because you've been moving this way for so long. So the more natural you can be, I think the better.
Yeah, real quick, just to clarify on a few things that made me think of when you said it. If I have current runners who are using the orthotics a bunch, yeah, like Lance said, I don't try and take them out of it just like cold turkey, because that is not usually a recipe for success. It's more on if people are considering them that or if, like Lance said, I will slowly try and take them off. And Lance brought up a good point. He said, just to clarify a little bit, when he was talking about the foot is not designed to have arch support, the reason is because we already have arch support built in. Like we have a really important muscle, posterior tibialis, that is our internal arch support. And so what a lot of the times when they're not necessary, what these orthotics do is they go do the job of this really important muscle, posterior tibialis. And so the body's very smart, use it or lose it. It's not gonna send nutrients to a muscle that doesn't need it. And so over time, if we just keep using this arch support to support the arch in our foot, well, that muscle is gonna atrophy and get weaker. There's no other place in the body where anyone says, hey, just use this sling or this brace till you die, pretty much, right? But I know it's an extreme example, but in the sense of an orthotic, it's like, well, hey, just support this, don't try and fix that muscle, just use this arch support. And it's like, well, then as soon as they come out of that shoe or as soon as they try and walk barefoot, it's like their foot's not prepared to handle that. But like Lance said, for hundreds and thousands of years, we've not had this fancy shoe technology. And it's funny, even if you look at how shoe technology has changed over the last couple of decades, and it kind of always swings in a pendulum, but there was a huge jogging boom in the 1980s. Prior to that, the thickness of running shoes was not near as thick as it is. And as more people started running and more people started to get injured, they started to increase the thickness of the soles of shoes, which short term fixed where they're having pain in that moment, but then kind of move things up the chain because of how the shoe technology changed kind of their form and how they were running, and just created a whole host of other issues.
So yeah, something I thought, like, just logically, if you have flat feet or whatever, and we say, here's an orthotic that's gonna what was the word you used, fill in that arch, or but like you said, the arch is made up of, the posterior tib is the biggest one, but there's two other muscles that somewhat contribute to it, or is it mainly just the posterior tibialis?
When you look at like supporting the arch, the posterior tibialis is pretty much the one that's either gonna make or break for the arch support. There are some other muscles there that are gonna help move things, but if we ever see someone who's struggling with the arch, it's posterior tib. So it's not doing its job.
That's cool.
So it attaches to most of the bones of the bottom of your foot. It has some kind of play there. So that's why we think it's probably the most important.
The big one.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at, the point there is, the arch it's made up of a muscle that can be trained, is what we're saying. So putting an orthotic there to do its job is not going to train the muscle. It kind of goes back to what we've talked about with surgery. The premise is your body's broken. It's going to be broken. Here's a quick fix, instead of, no, your body maybe is messed up in this area, but it can regenerate, it can heal given the right guidance. So you can get that posterior tibialis stronger. You can probably get more of a solid arch, even if your foot is flat. You're not going to make it all of a sudden have a high arch.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with someone coming in with high arches versus someone coming in with flat feet, right? It's more, can you move into both of those positions? Because just because someone has high arches does not mean they have a strong posterior tibialis. And just because someone has flat feet doesn't mean they have a weak posterior tibialis. Again, we're all created differently. It's more, can your body move in and out of the positions it's supposed to with the correct amount of strength there. So.
That's good to know. In my mind, there were more arch muscles that were equally important. So it's good to know the post tib is the big one there. Okay, so going along with y'all saying be as natural as you can in running, not having these inserts and orthotics. So I know we've talked about like zero drop shoes. I currently am running in completely barefoot shoes with no support. It's a long process, but it's going okay, I would say. Still working on it. So I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is there a benefit to zero drop, or is it, of course it depends. What's the benefit of a zero drop shoe? Could that be more optimal? And what is a zero drop shoe?
Yeah, so the heel toe drop is the measurement from the stack of the height of the heel down to the toe. Typically your Nikes, your Asics and Brooks and all those, you probably have an 8 to 12 millimeter drop. That's usually what people use for walking shoes and stuff. So the problem isn't that zero drops are bad. It's that people usually walk around or run and participate in activities for most of their life with shoes that have 8 to 12 millimeters of drop. So that limits your ankle range of motion and kind of limits your dorsiflexion range of motion, right? So then you go to a zero drop shoe and try to do something explosive, you're going to have some problems. That's you're going to overwork some stuff that could lead to some pretty serious injuries. Achilles ruptures is probably the most common one of that, or tendonitis or tendinopathy there. Zero drop's great. Yeah, if you have really strong ankles and you have the range of motion you need, like I wish I could run in zero drops. I have an old ankle injury, and so my range of motion doesn't allow me to do that. So I try to stick to 4 to 5 to 6 millimeters of drop, just so I can allow my inert tissues, my Achilles, my post tib, all the tissues that kind of act like a spring to do their job. That doesn't happen as much with a stack height of 8 to 12. You're kind of just relying on the cushion of the shoe. But yeah, so going back to the question of like zero drop shoes, are they bad? No, they're great. I think more people would benefit if they could get to it. The problem is we don't start off there. From a young age, we stick kids into these little shoes, and then instead of just letting them run around barefoot. So they're not bad. Our society doesn't do well with them because we wear boosted shoes with a lot of cushion for extra support.
Yeah. Do you think there's any merit to something I've heard, I don't know where from, but talking about zero drop or wide toe box shoes? It's an argument people make a lot with barefoot shoes, and I'm not married to every barefoot argument. I'm genuinely just curious. Is there any merit to the thought process of, if you maybe have some foot ankle injuries, or maybe your knee hurts, or maybe your hip hurts, you run a good bit or you're active, but you've always worn really cushiony shoes, is there any merit to slowly trying to ramp yourself onto less of a drop and a wider toe box, and allowing that foot to spread out and allowing the toes to spread out and allowing the ankle to move more? I'm genuinely curious. Is there any merit to that?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because when someone's having those pain issues, like, could it be related to what you're in? Absolutely. Could it not be? Like, sure. There could be plenty of other things going on. I think everyone in their head thinks that they do it slowly when they change their heel toe drop. But like, realistically, you want to go down about 2 millimeters every time you change shoes. Like at the most 4. So like for me, I used to do 10 to 12s, and now I'm similar to Lance, like 4 to 5, like maybe up to 6 is kind of what I try and do. But it took me about 2 years to go from that down to like the 4 to 5. And I think there were some points where I was probably even still going a little bit too quick with how I was doing my changes. Because it really does, it changes what areas of the body are stressed more. It's like Lance was saying, There is some research out there that shows it will likely decrease injury, but a lot of people had, in short term, who did it too quickly, significantly increased like Achilles injuries or like ruptured their Achilles because they tried to transition too quickly. So I think people are like, oh yeah, I'll do it slowly, and they do one shoe down a few, and the next shoe down like 6 millimeters. And within like 6 months, they've gone down like 8 millimeters. And it's especially if you're a seasoned runner, have been running for a while, it's just too much too quickly.
And especially if, like, what about, because y'all run 30 to 40 miles a week sometimes. What are y'all doing now? I know you're training, but.
I did 50 last week.
Yeah, I did 50.
Like, what if somebody had some recurring issues, was interested in dropping some? If they really cut the mileage, would that help?
What I would do, honestly, is I would not just go.
I'm not saying drop 10 millimeters.
Yeah. I would probably not just go. If you're trying to drop the shoe and try and do it quicker, I wouldn't go from like running in just a 12 millimeter to just an 8 millimeter. Like I would probably
Alternate.
like half and half, and then like
Okay.
slowly start just so the foot can adapt more. I would not get to the place though where you've got one shoe that's a 4 and one shoe that's a 12, and like half your running days you're doing in this and half you're doing in this, because then it's like, all right, what's going on here? What are we trying to stress? But there's nothing wrong with, as you're coming down, like instead of it being all with the lower drop, you are spending a little bit of time still in the shoe that has the higher drop.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what somebody recommended for me back in the day, was to have 2 pairs of shoes, sometimes 2 different brands of shoes, and have one that like a 2 to 2 millimeter drop difference. So I went from, kind of like Hunter said, 10, 8 to 6, and I just alternated those until now I can. It took about 2 years to work down safely. Funny enough, as I've decreased my millimeter stack height slowly, I have less Achilles problems.
Really?
When I was running with 8 to 10, I would have an occasional flare up of my Achilles on my right side. Now that I'm in a 4, I feel like I'm stronger and faster and more durable because of it. And I'm using less shoe, so I think that's
really interesting.
there's something that I think there's personal experience. There's some truth behind that. Yeah.
But disclaimer, it's because Lance did it the right way, slowly. If you're
2
having
years.
if you're having Achilles issues, don't rush to
Don't
drop
just jump
to
into
a lower shoe. Take your time.
Yeah.
For sure. No, that was because something I wanted to say was purely personal experience. Not, I guess maybe there is some research about barefoot, but it's been a process. But I mean, I have done it for almost over a year now, because I couldn't run for a year because of my stomach problems. So then I was like, well, I guess it's time to reset. So then I ran in those CrossFit shoes that, I mean, it couldn't have been much of a drop. And I did that for like 8 months. I was only running 5-6 miles a week, once or twice a week. So I'm not pushing anything. But now I've gone completely barefoot, and it's okay. I strained my calf at one time, but
you had some biomechanical dysfunctions.
yeah, I had some issues. But overall, I'd say after getting my hips stronger, thanks to Lance's recommendations, and wearing these, I've had less like arch posterior tib pain.
Yeah.
Because before I had my health issues, my right ankle was pretty uncomfortable, would pop and click a lot.
Yeah.
It gave me some problems when I ran, and strengthening my hip and going to a wider, flatter shoe has helped with that. It's not the cure-all, obviously, and I've tried to go slow. But yeah, I was just curious about that. What is the Saucony shoe that you run in now, the Turbo or whatever?
I have
Because I had the same one, right?
Yeah.
What's the drop on that?
Endorphin speed. I
That's
would say it was like a 6 or 8.
Okay.
So that's more of it has a plate in it, and that's the only reason I use it for speed and races.
Oh yeah, it's a great shoe.
I liked it a lot. It's bouncy, springy, but right now I'm in the Ultra Forwards, which is a 4 mil drop. That's what I do a lot of my base miles in. So I kind of, I don't stick always to 4, but if I'm just doing easy stuff, that's what I'm in. for like a race or something, I use the carbon plate technology to help out a little bit.
I mean, it's a fun shoe.
It is
I
a
remember
fun
when I wore it, you just kind of bounce.
Yeah, and it does make a difference there. It really does. Like those faster split miles feel a lot less. They're effortless almost.
That's cool.
Compared to like not using shoe technology. So shoe technology isn't bad.
Yeah.
Like if you utilize it smartly, like it can help you reach your goals.
Yeah.
Just from experience from last year and this year, I've used pretty much a carbon plate shoe in all my tries and some of my longer races. And yeah, my muscles are not as sore.
That's awesome.
I recover super fast. Yeah, compared to when I was just using regular shoes. So again, shoe technology is good if you use it the right way, and you figure out what works for your best body. And I think that's, as physios, that's kind of fun for our job because we have a decent understanding of what's out there and some recommendations, and we can examine your, kind of like we did with you, right? You're wanting to go barefoot or zero drop and more wide toe box, which is great, but with some hip weakness, right? And those over straining your post tib on one side, and then old ankle injury on the left side that causes you to strain your calf. Like, those things happen, but we've corrected those, and you're doing well in those shoes. So it just kind of depends. Like again, it goes back to it just depends.
And taking it slowly, because that's another thing I wanted to say was a lot of people. I feel like I've seen like the logic of barefoot shoes. It's logical, right? It's naturally how your foot goes, and they say as long as you ramp up right, you should be okay. But I'm a hunter. Human nature, we overestimate ourselves. We're not patient. So even if that is true, even if it's true that if you ramp up right, barefoot shoes may help you, so the majority of human beings are not going to ramp up the right way, and you're probably going to get injured. So
I'll say if you're interested in zero drop barefoot shoes or ultras, wear them for your everyday stuff. Wear them to work in, wear them to walk in, hike in. Just don't run in them. But like, just get used to being in a shoe that has no support or no heel toe drop. And that's the best way to get introduced to it. Just walk. Just walk in them, and that'll allow you at least to build some capacity and inch your way down.
Well, it's honestly pretty crazy. Once again, this is purely anecdotal, but when I got the barefoot sandals that I have, at first I would only wear them on like getting groceries, and like my right foot would be tired and hurting by the end of being in Sprouts for 10 minutes, right? I'm probably not even walking half a mile. So it's really, but I did that for months, now I can run a couple miles in them, and my calves are toast by the end of that. But it's just interesting how my right foot couldn't handle it at first, and couldn't handle walking at first. But like you said, you kind of gotta take it slow, wear it very short distances, see how it goes. Anyways, we'll move on from that. Enough about the barefoot shoes. Y'all don't have to go in depth on this necessarily, but something y'all have talked to me about a little bit, we've never gone into details, is just running form, and how I feel like gathering from y'all say more so it's better to midfoot or forefoot strike rather than heel strike. And that may not be exactly what you're saying, but that's something I've gathered from y'all and something I've tried to implement to my running. So is there a proper running form? And if so, why is forefoot striking possibly more advantageous? Isn't that gonna rupture your Achilles?
Yeah, so the form that Lance and I advocate for and that we teach to our runners, it's called the pose method, and we won't get super into the weeds with it, but essentially we look at multiple different factors, where their foot is first contacting the ground, what the body lean looks like, how much drop they're having in their hip. So we get into all of that, but really what it comes down to in simple terms, when we talk about forefoot, midfoot, heel striking, most people are heel strikers, and heel striking in itself is not the issue. The issue is what happens typically when you heel strike is because you are overstriding. When you overstride, your heel's going to contact the ground first. When that happens, you're much more rigid. It puts a lot more stress through the joints of the foot, ankle, knee, hip, as opposed to the muscles being able to absorb that. And so what we'll do is, it's funny, we'll get a lot of runners and like, oh, well, I know I'm not a heel striker, don't worry. And so we'll video our runners and we do it frame by frame. And it's like blatantly obvious they are just nailing the concrete with their heel.
No way.
And they're like, I would have never thought that I was a heel striker. But I would say,
How do you not know?
I would say 95% of the runners that I work with are significant heel strikers. And I would say 75% of those are very adamant that they're not until we look at the video. But the reason they don't know, it goes back to what I was saying, 1980s, huge jogging boom. Since then, if you look at the thickness of the soles of shoes, have continued to get bigger. They do that because people were having all of this like foot pain, so they make the arch huge. Now you can land on your heel and it's not painful because you have all this padding and cushioning. But back to what you were saying about barefoot running, if you go run barefoot, I guarantee you there is no way you are heel striking. Like, it is way too painful. The heel of the foot is not designed to take that impact. So you land more midfoot, forefoot. But because the shoe technology, which again, I agree with Lance, a lot of it's great, but there are some places where it has caused more injuries because people aren't utilizing it correctly. Because we build up the thickness of the shoe so much, it allows us to heel strike, which typically causes us to overstride. And so now we are hitting with a more locked out posture, which is causing a lot of pain through the joints as opposed to the muscles taking that. And so cadence is how many steps we're taking per minute. It changes a little bit based on how tall you are, like how long your legs are, but in general, you want to try and get your cadence up to 180. When you're doing that, that usually takes care of where your foot is landing. It's more of a forefoot, midfoot strike as opposed to heel strike. And I'll say people argue a lot, the runners that I work with, they're like, well, I can't do that on my slower runs versus my faster runs, like I have to heel strike on these different runs. What's interesting, if you go look, I'll show most of my runners this, there's a video of Usain Bolt running the 100 meter in slow motion. And when you watch him run in slow motion, his front leg overstrides so far, but because he is pulling through quickly, he actually lands on his forefoot each time, even the 100 meter dash, even though he's reaching so far out in front of him. So again, the simplest thing I think you can look at is your cadence. See what that looks like. Anecdotal evidence, but for me, I went to a running course to learn a lot of this stuff. My cadence was like low 150s. I was getting injured frequently. I go to this course, learn about all this stuff. I'm still not to 180 yet, which I think it'll be a little bit harder for me to get there because I've got longer legs, but I'm up to like upper 160s now, running further, faster, and with less injuries. And I think a huge part of that is because I'm changing where the stress is being distributed because I've increased that cadence a lot. So
cool.
If you want to add anything to that.
It just goes back to energy transfer. Where's the energy? Where's the load? What's breaking down? You know, with overstriding or heel striking, it's just everything's kind of locked out and jarring. And so joints that have previous injury or that are sedentary most of the time are not going to respond very well to that. But if you start to transition more to the mid or forefoot, you're actually using your kind of inner tissue structure to help kind of absorb and spring out of that. It's just a more efficient way of running. If you have heel striking, it's very inefficient, requires more energy, requires more force. It's just very tiresome. Land in the middle of your foot, you're going to have more elastic stored energy to transfer, and you can run faster, kind of like Hunter said, faster, further, less injuries, because that's the way the tissues were designed to be used. They weren't designed to be stuck out, locked out. So it goes back to energy transfer.
Yeah, and you made a good point. I forgot to mention, so the jarring Lance is talking about, when you look at it at slow motion, it pretty much is you are braking each time your heel hits the ground. So think you're accelerating, then you brake when your heel hits, then you accelerate again, over and over and over again. And there's so much misinformation out there, and it's just because I think it's what people have learned, but like I feel like people are getting more knowledgeable on it now, but for the longest time with runners, it was like, well, it doesn't matter how you do it, just get out there and do it, right? Just get out there and run. And a lot of times I feel like, we won't go too much into the weeds, but the running form we're talking about, coaches have always told, like a lot of the runners I've worked with, they will come in and the kids are like, well, my coach told me like I need to push my back leg off really hard. Like when you look at correct running form, you should not be pushing the back leg off at all. It's a pull forward. And so a lot of my runners, it's even like a cueing of, I don't want you to focus on pushing the back leg, focus on pulling the back leg forward quicker. And so when you do that, that usually corrects the cadence some. Because when you're pushing, you're holding back there, you're trying to push quicker, as opposed to just focusing on that quick turnover and pulling that foot in front of you. So
I've never thought about it like that. So possibly you want to focus more on pulling your back foot through rather than pushing.
Correct. Yeah, and honestly, what I tell most of my runners, which corrects a lot of things, is if you just focus on the cadence and try and improve that will, if there's just one thing you wanted to focus on, that'll probably give you the most bang for your buck. It's just trying to improve cadence.
Really?
Not that that'll fix everything, but it does fix a lot of things.
So the cadence is more of, like the forefoot striking is important, but cadence is really how you get there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense though. So, all right. Yeah, the cadence thing was also super new to me. I had never even thought about that until y'all mentioned it. I actually don't know what mine is because my watch actually doesn't count it.
I would say not all, but most watches will, and they'll usually give you a reading. But if not, it's okay. I'll have some of my runners practice with like a metronome in place, or there are like playlists out there that they make with music that plays beats per minute to those songs, and so you can just match the tempo and run to that.
And you said I know it's based off how tall you are, but
you want to shoot for 180.
180.
Yeah.
If you're around 180, you're good.
Yep.
Probably.
Typically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I need to work on that. I've tried to take shorter steps since I've heard y'all talk about it. I've tried to pull my leg through. Sometimes I don't think about it. But
It does take a lot to retrain, so it's something you have to be very patient with, and it's a motor pattern, so it's like relearning how to do something from the get-go. So it's tough, but it's doable. It just, again, it goes back to energy transfer, and it's not that hill striking is bad or forefoot striking is preferred. It's more about how efficient are you moving. That's kind of how we're designed. Yeah. We're designed to be super efficient beings, and so the more efficient we can be, I think the less injuries we have.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I didn't even touch on it. It is going to feel foreign at first when you try and change your cadence. Like, it's not something that happens. It was honestly for me probably a couple of months in till I felt like I had to actively stop thinking about how I was running when I was running, and then it became natural. It's not like you just go out there and like, all right, I'm going to increase my cadence, and then you forget about it, because you're just going to like motor patterns, like Lance was saying. If you've been doing something, especially for hundreds or thousands of miles, like doing one or two runs differently is not going to change that. Like you will quickly revert back to how it was. And so it's a process, and it does take time, like Lance said, and it's going to feel very foreign, honestly, the first couple of weeks that you're trying to change that.
So get the cadence up, get the steps per minute up.
Get you a metronome.
Get you a metronome.
Win in Winston.
Yeah, just go run 10 miles with the metronome in your AirPods. Yep. You'll be a boss then. Okay, I feel like that covers a lot of the main stuff I wanted to ask y'all. I'm just gonna throw some random quick hitters. Don't have to give a detailed answer. And I feel like a lot of these are, it depends, but these are what the people wanted. So someone asked, is the 10% rule a good one as far as increasing your mileage? You only want to increase your mileage 10% a week. Is that a good rule to follow?
I'm personally not a fan of the 10% rule. I think it's a vast overgeneralization, just because If I've got someone that's running 10 miles a week, that means they're only increasing by 1 mile. So it'd take a super long time for them to build up. Now, I am a fan of slowly building up, but to be honest, most of the time people usually get hurt because they're increasing their mileage too quickly is because either A, there's a biomechanical breakdown, and so something's being overstressed or overstrained, or B, you're not running with the correct form, and so then you're stressing different areas of the body that weren't designed for that much quicker without giving them time to adapt. So I'm all for a slow buildup, but I don't like to say, like, this is the cap or don't do more than this. It's like, hey, if you're feeling good, yes, be smart about it. But at the same time, you don't have to say, well, I can only go up this much because of what's happening. I'm more, are you running the correct way? Do you have any biomechanical breakdowns? If both those are fine, then hey, I'll ramp up faster than 10%. And would have runners ramp up faster than 10%. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't do I like the rule just to keep you safe, but I look at it for months at a time. Like, what'd you run last month? Or kind of honestly, I've been asking the question, how many miles did you run the past year, right? And that kind of can give you an insight of how healthy somebody is. If they're running 1,500 miles and not really having any issues, do they need the 10% rule? Probably not. But if they've only run like 5 or 6 miles here and there for a week, do they need to do a marathon in like 10 weeks? I don't know. That's kind of a lot. So it just kind of depends on their goals and what they're trying to achieve. But yeah, 10% is a good way to stay safe, but it can be overgeneralized for somebody who's pretty fairly active.
Another friend asked, which once again, this is a very, very general question, but if you are, like, think lower level runners than y'all, someone more like me, and I don't mean that condescendingly, that's just a fact, I don't run nearly as much as y'all. Are there any essential principles or muscle groups that someone should be strengthening consistently if they want to prevent injury? Obviously, everyone could have a previous ankle injury. Obviously, y'all can't predict that. But is there any general rules that you would teach someone? Like, hey, you probably do want to strengthen this area, or you do want to mobilize this area at large?
I would say just in general, most people, not even just runners, but most people, so your the glute muscles on the side of your hip, they are what they would kick your leg out to the side or abduct your legs. They are also what keep your hips from dropping or from falling. And so like I was talking about, me and Lance will video runners, and what we see on a lot of our runners is when you land on one foot, the other hip actually drops as a quick hip drop, which is usually a sign or indication of that glute muscle on the side is really, really weak. So if you think about it, running across the parking lot and you're going up and down and the hips and pelvis shearing like this, it's not a big deal. But if you're training 5K, 10K, half marathon, like, that's going to break down something every time. So I think what I would just say is probably the muscle on the side of the hip is just generally weaker in some more runners. I don't know if you got other thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think mainly it's your glute muscles, right? Most of our jobs, we sit a lot, so those are probably going to be pretty weak because you're not using them majority of the day and you're kind of inactive. So those are probably the ones that people struggle the most. You say 80% of what we do is core and hip strengthening for runners.
Okay.
So
keep the hips strong.
Yeah, keep the hips strong.
The glute med, glute max.
Yeah, especially glute max is powerful muscles, but we sit on them all day, so they're just acting as a cushion.
Yeah, that's interesting. Another friend was asking me about his shoes and his Achilles tendinopathy, but I felt like we kind of covered that of, like, you want to check that drop. Maybe if you're at like a 10 to 12 millimeter, you might want to think about ramping down the miles.
Yeah,
getting a lower drop.
Yeah, I think it would be healthier for long term to go lower, but you got to ask the question, like, why is it breaking down?
But it could be
something
different
else.
things.
Yeah, it doesn't have to always be this year. It could be old ankle injury, compensation to the hips.
Yeah. Could be a million different
Usually where
things.
we start things is mechanically, biomechanically with the body first, and then the external stuff will kind of correct itself.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. And this guy's married to a PT, so should be able to get evaluated pretty easily.
yeah.
Let's see. Was there anything else here? I think that's about it, actually.
Yeah.
So.
No, running's fun. I think, like I said, we're designed to be the most efficient being, which is kind of mind blowing the way we're designed. Super efficient. So that's why we can, you know, we're not as fast as a cheetah or a gazelle, but you know, primitively, like we could hunt down buffalo and different things because we just outlast them, right? We just can be active for so long when we're healthy. So it's really cool to see what our bodies are able to do. So just enjoy running. Like it's fun. It doesn't matter if you want to do a 5K or 10K or a marathon or just 1 mile to see if you still got it in the tank. Like it's fun. Yeah, just it's healthy. There's a lot of extra benefits besides just the wind blowing through your hair. I mean, it's just a lot of endorphins, a lot of things, a lot of stress relief. So running's such a good activity. So I think that's why we're both pretty passionate about just getting people outside and moving and enjoying that. You know, get out from behind the computer screen and go see the world. Yeah,
Get some sunlight.
Get some sunlight.
Yeah, and just on what Lance is saying, we both love to run and we love to work with people who want to run. Nothing frustrates me more than having someone come in and be like, well, I don't run anymore because my doctor told me to not run or I can't run. So we will not go down this rabbit hole. All I'm going to say
Did we
is
talk about that already?
we were designed to run. So if you were having pain with running, there is something going on. Go find a good PT, get it fixed so you can run. Just don't listen to you shouldn't run anymore because that's baloney. So.
Yeah. Even if what if you're like 50?
Well, again, it always depends, right? Like
What
let's say
if you're healthy?
If you're healthy and you haven't had these slew of surgeries and all these things, then yeah, you should be able to run. But obviously, there's always exceptions. But general population, you should be.
I got 2 patients with that, both of them runners. She's 70 something and she does 100-mile races.
No.
And yeah, I promise you.
What?
Yeah. And then another
70?
guy. Yeah, she's 70. And then he's like 65 and still runs some.
Goodness
so
gracious.
they're out there. Yeah, and they're in really good health, you know. They're
That sounds outrageous. But that's not who we typically treat. Because most of the people who are doing so good, they don't need us. We're seeing the people who are just starting to run and there's something going on.
The lady, when I eval'd her, she was like, I know I'm old, but don't tell me I don't need to run. And I'm like,
respect.
That wasn't my goal. She was like, I go to the doctors and they're like, you're not supposed to be doing this. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. And so she has a really cool story. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, her husband passed away and she needed something to do and so she fell in love with running. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And just same as us. She rolled her ankle back in April and didn't really think about it and then started getting some medial knee pain with running and so we've worked on a few things. She's back to running 2 hours. Within a month, we're getting back to 2 hours of running without any issues.
So if you're starting to run and you have an injury, don't let it get you down. Your body is most likely 99% chance not permanently broken.
Yeah.
Try to get some help. Try to get somebody to assess the biomechanical breakdowns because it is such an amazing hobby. Even right now, just running once or twice a week, it's like I feel like a different person almost after I run. Just the stress reduction, getting some sunlight, getting outside, hearing the birds chirp, and the society we live in now, we're all inside staring at a computer screen all day. I mean, even as therapists, we're inside 9 hours a day. You know, not looking at the computer the whole time, but a lot of the day with documentation. So we could all run some more. I think that's about it. But one thing I wanted to clarify with the drops, it is possibly beneficial in the long term to maybe drop down from like the 10 or 12 millimeters.
Yeah,
You would say?
I would recommend trying
Okay.
to drop down. But whatever you think slow is, double that amount of time. And then
Take
do
it
with
very,
that.
very slowly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let it be a 2 to 3 year process as you work your way down.
Mhm.
Again, you shouldn't be changing your shoes every 300 miles. It's going to be more to
Really?
5 to 800. So you might not, if you,
I mean,
depending
you
on how much
can, but one, it's probably too quick, and two, you're just spending money that you don't have to.
So we'll talk about that in the financial podcast. Why you shouldn't do that. But
That's 3 hours.
But yeah, I mean, ideally, if you think about it, if your goal is to be a more efficient runner, you need less support.
Okay.
So I think if you transition that way, you're just going to be healthier.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. What's for dinner tonight?
Probably some noodles.
I already have some
And
Straight up noodles?
and some pesto.
Okay, okay.
That's what's on the menu.
All right.
It's just me at the house, no wife, so got to keep it easy.
I understand that. I understand that. So already had some za.
Yeah, already have some za.
What are the toppings?
One of our favorites is a breakfast pizza that Walmart makes.
Whoa.
And
Oh,
so some leftovers with that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Mhm.
Well, sweet. That's all we got. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back soon.
Check your bank accounts. We'll be balancing that checkbook next time.